Do you have a pile of cardstock scraps you want to make use of? Today's card is for you. Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm going to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get started. Today, I have a card that uses up a bunch of cardstock scraps that are ironically created from my no scrap templates. My no scrap templates create no pattern paper scraps, but they do leave cardstock scraps. And I have all kinds of ways I make use of my cardstock scraps. I cut sentiments from them, as you can see. I use them to make fake foam tape. So I take 2 layers of my thick cardstock together, tape them, and then I'll put it behind like a stamped image instead of foam tape. Or I use them to prop up different elements of the card so that everything appears nice and smooth. But even with all of that, there are still cardstock scraps left from time to time. And so I decided, since I had this fun new die set from Spellbinders, I would cut a whole bunch of scraps at one time. Like, it would be a good way to use up a bunch of scraps. This is the Spellbinders Assorted Tags die set, and I'll be using their Let's Celebrate sentiment set, both of which were sent to me, and I did share another video with an idea for them. So if you want to see something that's a little bit more like my typical videos using this sentiment and tag set, I have that as well. But I decided to add some interest and dimension to the side of the tags by inking them up. I picked some Lawn Fawn inks that were just a little bit darker than my cardstock. All the cardstock that I'm using today is Michael's Recollections cardstock. A lot of my cardstock in my collection is from the Michael's 110 pound line. I don't really like the 65 pound. It just feels flimsy. It doesn't die cut as well. You can, when you die cut words, it can bend up really easy and that kind of thing. But the 110 pound is quite good quality and very reasonably priced compared to a lot of that thicker cardstock that is out there. But it's limited in its color. So I purchase cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, Gina K, Lawn Fawn. It's worth it sometimes to get some of those different colors that give me more selection. But this just happens to all be Recollections. I particularly think this idea works well when you have a die set where there are multiple dies so that you only have to take a couple of passes through your die cut machine. So for instance, when I pulled out that dark blue cardstock, I found enough scrap for cutting each of the dies that I wanted to use, and then I ran it through all at the same time. Because if I had to run these through my die cut machine individually, it just wouldn't be worth it. There's quite a few tags to create a single card here. I'm going to change up the way that the tags are placed here on my card. So some are facing sideways, some are upside down, tilted to the left and right, just to add some interest and to kind of fit things together like a puzzle. If you have a bunch hanging off of any of the card, and so if a significant portion of the tag is hanging off the card, you can cut that off and use it to fill in a space somewhere else. But in this case, to keep things simple, I kind of just used a whole tag every time and didn't worry about the scraps that would be created from chopping all those off. That to me is just going to head to the compost bin. I like the idea of an ombre for this, but this will work with absolutely whatever scraps you have. You could even do it with pattern paper scraps, but I would suggest that maybe save one of the elements to be cardstock just so that you could stamp your sentiment. But if you're going to do something like, say, die cut a sentiment, which would be great too, another way to use scraps, then pattern paper everywhere would be great. This is certainly not a cardstock only sort of design. The inks that I use to ink up the edges are the Lawn Fawn inks, which I love, and they come in a lot of great colors. But something I wanted to mention is because I was inking them up on my Waffle Flower stencil mat. The Waffle Flower stencil mat is silicone. It will stain, but I did find that the Lawn Fawn inks stained it more than, say, the Distress inks, because the Distress inks are water-based and they're very reactive with water. If you use them and then you clean your mat, I didn't really get a lot of staining. But with the Lawn Fawn inks, I didn't clean right away, but also I noticed even that they tended to stain the mat a bit more, which is fine. I'm not trying to say anything negative about either product, because that is expected behavior, but it's something that I want you to be aware of. Because, say, for instance, like if you were to use your Ranger glass mat, that doesn't really stain. So you might expect the same thing from the stencil mat, but it's not the same kind of material. It's a little bit different, but it's also grippier. So your tags would slide all over the place on your Ranger craft sheet, and they're not going to on your waffle flower stencil mat. I've taken the same 3 colors that I used to stamp the edges or to ink the edges, and I'm going to use that to stamp a sentiment on the 3 tags that are going down the middle. This kind of just worked out. Originally, I thought I would probably only stamp the sentiment on one of them, but because there was one in each color that was kind of grouped together and kind of along the center, I decided to add the sentiment 3 times in the 3 different colors. And here I'm just making sure that I'm getting a good impression by using a Post-it note here. You could use any sort of scrap of paper or cardstock. And I want to also, because this is a new stamp, this is the first time I've used this particular stamp from the collection, I want to make sure it's ready to give a nice impression before I stamp down. I also want to make sure that it's dark enough that it will appear on any of the colors, and so that's why I was testing it out also on some scrap cardstock. Then I'm going to take my scissor and I'm going to cut off any of the excess tag. You might want to use your paper trimmer for this. It might give you a slightly more finished look. But I find that the scissor is helpful, particularly in the instance of when you're cutting along that fold there. So when I close the card and I have to get the stuff off the edges, if I were to use my paper trimmer, there's a slight chance I'll take some of the cardstock with me and I could cut the card open. So particularly on that side, I might recommend going in with your scissors instead. If you found this video inspiring, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.